Very good. Great to hear these testimonies, of course. Reminders that God's blessing us and helping us and looking after us as he told us that he would do. I'll get you to open up, if you will, back to the book of Genesis this morning. What's the time? 11:07. We'll see if we can pull off another miracle and have a 20-minute Sunday morning talk. Don't worry, I'll be impressed as well. I've seen the scriptures. Genesis chapter 37, if you will. So we're back in Genesis. Genesis is a wonderful book. I really enjoy Genesis, even though some people sort of gag at it a little bit. It sort of contains all the background that helps you understand the whole Israel thing. Now, Genesis chapter 37, we're dealing here with Joseph. You've kind of got, don't forget, you've got Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob has his name changed to Israel. Israel has 12 sons, and they become the 12 tribes of Israel. It's a really happy story. It's not a sad story. This happens roughly 1800 BC, so it's a long, long time ago. And we're up to the story of Jacob, or Jacob Israel, and his son Joseph. So verse 3, I'm going to pick some verses out to set the scene for you. Now Israel, that's Jacob, Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a coat of many colours. And when the brethren saw that, their father loved him more than all the brethren, and they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. So your basic, we're only up to chapter 37, but your basic family mess is what we're about to describe here. The other 11 boys couldn't stand Joseph as a result of his father's attention. Verse 11, and the brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying, and his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come and I'll send thee to them. And he said, here am I. A little further down, verse 17. And the man said, they are departed thence. So he's looking for his 11 brothers. They're departed thence. For I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near to them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, let us slay him and cast him into some pit. Now, you read this story and you think, oh, that sounds a bit far-fetched. But there's many of us who, when we were young, thought, I wouldn't mind killing one of my little brothers. You know, he's been a horror to me, or selling him or something or other. And that's, not literally, but figuratively speaking. In verse 20, halfway through, and we will say, some evil beast has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands. And he said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of the hands, to deliver him out of to his father again. So Reuben's trying to actually rescue Joseph, but it doesn't go to plan. A little further down in verse 24. So they took him and cast him into the pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread and lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balms and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brethren, what does it profit if we slay our brother or conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. And again, I suspect there's more than one child over the decades has thought, I wouldn't mind selling my little sister or my little brother. Let our hands be not upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and his brethren were content. And there came past the Midianites, the merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. And he returned to the brethren and said, the child is not. And I, whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of goats and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colours, and they brought it to their father, and they said, this we found, Know not now whether it be thy son's coat or not. And he knew it. And he said, It's my son's coat. An evil beast has devoured him. And Joseph was without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob, that's the father, rent his clothes and put his sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. And all the sons and all the daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, For I will go down to the grave to my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. Now I'm going to skip a few bits and pieces here, but I just want to get back to the actual story of Joseph again. We sort of left his father Jacob in distress and misery back in chapter 37, believing that his son has been mauled by wild animals and killed. Would have been a devastating experience for him, particularly if he's your favourite son. Just putting that out there. But we pick up the story again down in chapter 39, verse 1. And Joseph was brought to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of the Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he do prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house and over all that he put his hand into his hand. And it came to pass from that time that he made him the overseer of his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had, in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught that he had, save the bread which he ate. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favoured. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. Now, there's a bit of an MA story coming up here, which I'm going to just skip just for the moment. But I think most of you remember the story. The lady decided she wanted this slave, Joseph, and when she couldn't have him, the story goes on down in verse 13. It came to pass when she saw that he'd left his garment in her hand and was fled, that she called unto the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, See, he has brought a Hebrew to us to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice, Liar, liar, pants on fire. The lady's lying through her teeth. And it came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice, he cried, he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up the garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spoke to him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which you brought to us came in to me to mock me. And it came to pass as I lifted up my voice and cried, this lady's going to get an Academy Award one day, that he left his garment with me and fled out. You can imagine the whole kind of expression that goes with that. Verse 19. It came to pass when the master heard the words of his wife, which he spoke unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant unto me, that his wrath was kindled. He was furious with Joseph, believing that he'd attempted to rape his wife. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed mercy, and gave him favour in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. And the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. It's a really strange story. And I'll just stop there for a moment to catch your breath and, make sure everyone's still with me on this story. But it is an amazing story. It's this strange combination. I call it tribulessing. Tribulessing. That's the title of the talk today, if you're not quite sure upstairs. Tribulessing. This guy Joseph goes from tribulation to tribulation to tribulation to tribulation. Think about it. He starts off as a 17-year-old kid, loved emphatically by his father. And this 17-year-old kid, he gets thrown into a pit, threatened with death, kidnapped, sold to some traders, eventually turn into a slave in the meat market down in Egypt somewhere, becomes a slave in Potiphar's house. Okay, things are looking up a little bit now. Food's good, if you like Egyptian food. Then the wife of this guy accuses him of something, and then if he does, he then gets thrown by the master into prison. He's gone from a 17-year-old kid down through slavery, eventually into prison. Now, we don't know exactly how long all of these different facets of his life lasted, but years, because we know that he started off at 17 and he emerges at the end at, who remembers how old Joseph was when he emerges? 30. Someone just said it. 30, Redfer, you can become a house leader. It's good. 30. So 13 years... Step by step by step by step, his life just got tougher and tougher and tougher. And the reason I'm calling it tribulessing is because the irony of this, the paradox of this is that wherever he lands, God blesses him. He got blessed in Potiphar's house, so much so that he became the supervisor of the entire property. He got blessed in prison, so much so that he became the kind of like, what was that expression they used to use? Not warden. Anyway, like a prisoner who is in charge of prisoners. There is a special expression for that. And so the whole time, everybody acknowledges, oh yes, God's with him. God's with him. God's with him. God's with him. If God's with him, how come he's going through all these dramas? If God's with him, why does he end up going from, as I say, a happy childhood, probably sitting at home playing Nintendo with his brother or something or other, to prisoner at the other end of the experience? And that would be no fun, being in an ancient Egyptian prison. No question about that. And it's funny because in our life in the Lord too, I just want to point out that quite often it's the same with us. We have these situations, you think, we have this combination, this strange sort of paradox sometimes. Oh, my work life's going really, really great. But gee, my health's suffering. My finances are good. But gee, I can't quite find a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Or my marriage is wonderful and the kids have just seen the blessing of the Lord right through my whole family situation. But my finances have collapsed on me at the moment. And it does seem this strange sort of, as I say, combination of features. Now, the God of the Bible promises to bless us and bless us and bless us. And all the people said. But he also told us that you're going to have tribulation. Many are the afflictions of the righteous. I mean, in one sense, I love that verse, but in another sense, I kind of hate it. Many are the afflictions of the righteous. And I mean, it wouldn't have been too bad if you'd have said, the righteous will get a few afflictions, the odd affliction, once a year, maybe once a month. No, it says many are the afflictions of the righteous. And we look at our lives sometimes, we think, but I'm just being blessed by God so much in that environment in my life there. But this over here is really tough. And sometimes you say to yourself, well, what's the point of tribulation anyway? You know, why am I going through tribulation? Who needs tribulation? Need that like a hole in the head. Thank you very much. Sometimes we cause our own tribulation. Let me just start off from that point. We do cause our own dramas sometimes. Well, you know, the young fellow that will come to me and say, oh, I've had a lot of persecution recently. Have you? Yes, 2 speeding fines in the last month. Unbelievable. I've just been persecuted and persecuted and persecuted. Was that not perhaps caused by you speeding? Well, that's a contributing factor, but usually I pray about it and the Lord just lets me straight through. You know, others perhaps have work situations. They're not getting on with the boss. They're not putting the effort in. Or maybe, you know, romance situations, whatever it may be. And of course, sometimes we cause our own dramas in life. And we have to learn through that process. All tribulation teaches you something. We read over in the book of Romans, it says, tribulation worketh patience. And that is one thing that happens. You become more determined, more resilient, more, wanting to follow God. Your faith grows. In another place, the New Testament says that that the trial of your faith being much more precious than of gold. In other words, even though you are in manifold tribulations, is what that verse says, temptations, it's producing gold in your life. And you look at gold in the natural, and gold doesn't generally come as a big lump. Most gold they find is dispersed through rock and what have you, and a few. In the old days, it used to be a few ounces per tonne of rock, so you've got to crush a big lump of rock like that down, and all you get at the end is a couple of ounces. But these days, it's actually down to grams per tonne. So you've got to crush the same amount of rock down just to get a few grams. But that gram of faith in your life, God considers to be very, very precious to him. It's more precious than anything else you would produce. It's better than gold. We read in another place in the Bible, it says that gold is for the fire, silver is for testing in the crucible, but God tests the hearts of men. In other words, you put fire, under the gold to get it, refined, and maybe fire under the silver to get it refined and so forth. You've got to put fire. Someone's got to hold the blowtorch to your feet sometimes, just to check that there's still gold there. And we do go through those tribulations, no question about that. And as I say, sometimes you look at it and say, why have I got this mixture? One part of my life's really good, the other part's just stressful as anything. Your job is to pray. The Bible says to be patient in tribulation. It says to rejoice in tribulation, to give thanks for all things. The Bible teaches us rejoice, and again I say rejoice. If you think of all the characters in the New Testament, Jesus Christ, about to be crucified, that's maximum tribulation, but at the same time enjoying the time that he had with his disciples. Or Paul, just being beaten to within an inch of his life, thrown into prison, and in the next breath, he's singing praises to God. And a miracle of an earthquake sets him free. And right through our lives in the Lord, that's exactly what's going to happen. It's refining you. It's getting you closer to what God is looking for in you. The Bible also says, whoever the Lord loves, he chastens and scourges. Now, I hate that word scourges. Scourge there means to whip. Ouch, that's serious, serious drama. And sometimes in life we get these things that are happening in our life, we think, oh, that's pretty heavy duty. But I guess the principle I want to go back to is that it's like our friend Joseph here, right back in the Old Testament. The Bible says the end of a thing is better than the beginning of a thing. The Bible says all things work together for good to them that love the Lord, for whom he is foreknown, and so on, implying that God knew our pathway, he knew what to do, he was directing us the whole time. Now Joseph goes through all of this, and I just want to pick up the story a little bit again, if you will, down in verse chapter 41, over the page. I think we all recall the story. Joseph goes from being a prisoner one day to being prime minister of Egypt the next. And Pharaoh said in verse 41, Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I've set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took of the ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. He made him ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him, bend the knee. In other words, kneel down. Here comes Joseph. Kneel down. On the side of the roads, they'd all have to kneel down. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee no man shall lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paneah. I don't know what was wrong with Joseph. And he gave him his wife to wife Asenath, the daughter of the priest of On, and so on. And Joseph went over all the land of Egypt. And the principle, of course, is that no matter how tough it is, no matter what steps you take in your what feels like a descent sometimes into more difficulty, the end of it is going to be glorious. The end of it is you're raised up to meet the Lord in the air. The end of it is you're covered in gold and, these trinkets that the Pharaoh puts upon Joseph here. The end of it is you're made immortal. The end of it is you're second in the kingdom after Jesus Christ. The end of it is when you go down the street, someone will shout out, kneel down, here comes such and such. He's a survivor from the previous era. The Bible teaches us in the book of Revelation that these are they who came out of great tribulation and washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb. And for all the things that Joseph might have felt, I missed out on this, or I didn't get that, or gee, it was rough when I was under Potiphar or something or other, or I got a beating under the prison guard or something or other, it's all forgotten the moment you're made prime minister. And all the people said. In our case, the moment we're raised up to meet the Lord in the air. There's so much other stuff in that story, but time will elude me today, and that is a 20-minute talk. There's your first miracle for today.